So I've got Melissa here, head of clinical operations for Aperio.
No, that's
what's your official? Oh, I'm sorry. What's your official title?
So it's director of eClinical Technologies. It's something I made up.
Yes, I like that. I like that. Maybe we should probably just start. Give us a little bit of your background.
So I've been using Medidata products since 2005. So as the gentleman before this session said, I'm an original gangsta. So I was accredited and certified as a rave programmer in 2007, I think. And then about 2 years ago, I joined Aperio. Came onto Aperio, and Aperio had a paper study. It was awesome. We had a paper TMF. And I chatted with our CEO and said, I think we need to, move into the new century. And so we got Medidata Rave last summer, so in 2017. And then last fall, when I came to Next, I said, hey, look at this. We use Box internally, and Box has a good foundation with the eTMF, and we're looking for an eTMF vendor. We had been using, or we were planning to use, another company that starts with a V. The implementation wasn't going so well. We had a lot of hiccups with that. So we brought Medidata in, did a demo on a CTMS, and they said, by the way, we have an eTMF. And it connects, and you can connect all of your stuff together. And we said, OK, sure. So just to flip back, so my background, I am a data manager. Been in the industry 20 years, but the last 5 or 6 years I've been playing with other technology, which is really cool. So I've got to play with eTMF, CTMS, strategic monitoring, SDV, balance. So a little bit here, a little bit there. And then I'm excited because Aperio is a full service CRO. We're on the smaller end of CROs, which is great because we can be flexible and we can be dynamic. And we have consulting services additionally, in addition to the full service part, on technology services, which is what I do, which is fun. So for sponsors that want to bring it in-house internally, I'll help them out. And then we have a QA consulting. That QA consulting will help sponsors bring their drug to the FDA or to the EMA, or make sure that the drug they want to buy is really a valid drug and the data makes sense. We actually have our head of QA doing an audit this week of a investigational-led study that a sponsor is going to buy, potentially, hopefully. So that's fun. And then we do strategic monitoring. So we get those resources to the right spaces at the right time in the US.
Really broadly capable company for,
it's fun.
for one of its size.
It's fun for little. It's fun, it's nimble. It's nice because we're not built on a lot of old processes. I said, when I got there, they were doing paper, but their processes were based on EDC, which was really funny. But we're really nimble and capable, and the women and the men I work with are fantastic, and they've got great industry experience. So
I find it, just not to sidetrack, but I find it an interesting example of companies without that legacy, right, being able to take advantage of new technologies, new processes, right, and almost getting a leg up. It's almost like it's an advantage to not be big.
You get your clean slate and you start again. Right. So you've got all of your experience, your knowledge of what you did wrong 15 years ago, where the industry's changed. You don't have to deal with some SaaS program you've been using for 17 years. You don't have to deal with all of that. So it actually was a lot helpful. All of our software is single instance, multi-tenant, so we don't have to worry about having the big monstrosity of worrying about upgrades and validation around that. We really do rely on our vendors.
Nice. Well, and I guess maybe just to switch back to the eTMF, what prompted you to evaluate eTMF systems in the first place?
So as I said, we in 2016, when I first got there, like literally the week I started, they were evaluating eTMF vendors, and our owner had a really long relationship with the sales guy from that V company. And she said, can you use it? And I said, sure, we can use it. They've got somebody that's going to tell us how to use it, right? And so we went through a pretty decent validation process with them. And it was very difficult, it was very clunky, and it was not transparent. So Aperio's motto is we make things clear. And the vendor was not helping me be clear. It was really difficult. And so it was a big decision for us to switch. We did not, I mean, everyone who knows me knows that I'm the Medidata person. Like, you know, if you have a question about Medidata tools or whatever, come ask Melissa, she knows. And I was the one back in the room going, really? We made this huge investment in this other software, you're just gonna ditch it? and we did. And so, and it's been fabulous. I've really, 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 really liked it. It's a totally different world.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how has the experience been different?
The software itself is based on the DIA model, right? So from a document collection perspective, it's based on the DIA model, right? So it's a known model. Everyone knows what it is. You know, everyone has a protocol section. You have a country level documents. You have site level documents. So it's really not that difficult, right? But for some reason, everyone makes it more difficult than it is, right? But there's customizations and there's ability to adjust and adapt. We're a CRO. We have to be able to manage and understand how the study's going to set up. So we need to know, can we make a study in the system where we don't have biostats? We're just doing clinical. We're not doing data management. Is that going to work? Or are we going to have all of these empty placeholders that we're going to have to deal with? Right. And we weren't getting answers. We weren't getting answers on how do you define a site? Like, is the site created when the site is activated? Is the site created when you load the first document? And their pricing model was based upon sites. Okay. Whereas Medidata's was a little bit more flexible, a little bit more, you know, we think you're going to need this much, but if you need more, it's sort of okay. I think the tool, as I said, the software works better than I think we had thought it was going to work. Okay. When I came to Medidata Next last year, people were here last year, saw the demo. It was sort of in the corner. We have this tool, but we're not really sure what we're going to do with it. We just bought this company, in case you didn't know. And so it wasn't overly sold last year. And it was sort of like, we don't want to push it out too far, right, but we want everyone to know it's there. But you guys brought it into the Medidata culture. The implementation team has allowed us to know what's going on, what does this mean, how are we going to deal with it, should we do placeholders, should we not do placeholders? The answer is yes, you do placeholders. Can you take them out? Yes. Can you remove them in mass? Yes. Can you not put placeholders for one study? Yes. Can you do this or that? There were a couple of things that we asked them, and it was challenging. Our implementation team was like, you want to do what? We asked them, we had a process where all of our SAEs went to the sites via email. So SUSAR reports went to the sites via email, and we required every single site to reply back to us to say, we've received it and we've sorted, right? That was our due diligence of, we know you got it and you've been aware of it. And we said, there's got to be an easier way to do this, right? Yeah. There's got to be an easier way to do this. So the team went back, and the two folks from Medidata took it back inside, and they said, there's a way to do this. We can do this. And so they came back to us, and they said, here, this is the way you can do it. You give the site access to a single section over here, and then when they get the doc, it'll send them an email, and it'll say, hey, you have a document. When they get the email, they will actually acknowledge that the document existed, and they can download it. And then when it's acknowledged, it'll file it directly into your eTMF in the folder for that site. So that workflow, which before was a lot of manual emails, making sure we didn't spell their email wrong and get a rejection, and then the annoying, you didn't send me back an email. You didn't send me back an email. You didn't send me back an email. This way we can, the CRA, it's on the site's end to go in and get it. It's really the PI's responsibility to make sure that they've acknowledged it. But they'll get it in a system where they're already in it. Yeah. So if we use Rave for EDC, they're logging it to iMedidata, and they'll log into eTMF at the same time, and they'll be able to go between the two.
That's actually a really good point, right? So this integrates with iMedidata, and all of your sites are using iMedidata anyway?
Yeah.
For studies that you're using Rave on? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the CRAs are always using iMedidata because CRAs will do the strategic monitoring, right?
Right.
So from a CRA perspective, they will have access to iMedidata for creating their monitoring visit reports, whether or not we use Rave. But for the studies where we're doing data management, we'll use Rave. So we've got the strategic monitoring allows the CRAs to go in, create their visit reports, and then with the newer model that's coming out in November, will allow the CRAs to also post the documents that they're collecting from source into iMedidata, into a portal. And then our eTMF specialists, which we call CSS teams, because you have to have another abbreviation. The CSS team will go in and categorize it and put it into the right place in the DIA module.
That makes perfect sense. Sense.
So most of our CRAs are not DIA experts. They don't know the TMF model. And so we don't expect them to know that. It just was a burden we didn't want to put on them.
Right. Rolling back just a little bit, like to the evaluation process, like who all at Aperio needed to be involved in that, right?
Oh yeah. So in the first implementation we did that we sort of tossed, we had myself and the ClinOps head and the manager of the team that did the TMF.
Okay.
That was about it. So the second time when we did the implementation, we said, you know what, we probably should get a little bit more people. Oh yeah, and finance. Don't forget them.
Right.
Don't forget finance. They're the ones that are going to pay for this. So in the second time when we did the demo of when we had Medidata come in and do a demo, because we were going to make a big switch, and we basically were going to throw out the other tool, we had the head of clinical, the head of the TMF team, the QA rep, myself, DM and safety were involved in the evaluation because our DM teams and our safety teams actually do file stuff in the TMF, and our CEO and our COO. So we did get some good high-level buy-in as well as the operational management team.
Nice. What I find interesting about this is I think especially at like larger companies that I work with, right? eTMF is kind of this thing, right? And they like kind of, hey, look, we have to go do this. It's owned by quality, and we'll just kind of let them do whatever they want, right? And I thought this was interesting that clinical operations really didn't even just participate, almost led this, right? And there are so many like business benefits to a system to the operation of a study.
Initially, and I think this a little bit was the way the other vendor sold it, was initially was the monitoring visit reports would go directly into the eTMF. And so that's why we ended up inviting clinical in. But then once they were there, we're like, oh, they really need to know this, right? They need to see the end product of what we're actually going to submit to the FDA at the end of the day and what our sponsors are going to see.
Yeah.
So.
That's cool. I know one of the challenges in evaluating any kind of software system, right, is there's always like a certain amount of like faith that goes into it, right? Like how do you, like, what are your methods for like evaluating vendors in a space and kind of separating the truth from the marketing fluff, and like how do you make sure a vendor can deliver?
So, as I said, we actually had Medidata come in and show us the CTMS tool. And then they sort of added in the eTMF, and we said, okay, but what happens if we don't buy the CTMS? Like, what does the eTMF look like? And they were able to send us the standalone model. Like, it's nice because there was a demo of, okay, this is what the eTMF looks like. And for those of you that were at the keynote yesterday, where Glenn went through all of the whole mass thing, right? Like everything's there. It's awesome. The reality is not everyone can buy everything at once, right? And so you can't, jump all in. So we wanted to know if we didn't get the CTMS, if we didn't get strategic monitoring, what did the eTMF look like? And it was hard to get that information from some of the vendors. Some of the vendors, it was, oh, well, when you do the EDC stuff over here, it comes into CTMS, and then it goes over here. And we're like, okay, what does the eTMF do? Like what do we need to do? And so, you always have iMedidata on the front end, which a little bit is a confusion to folks that are doing an evaluation, that it is actually separate tools underneath it. But it was easy enough to see that that was a separate tool.
Right.
It is easier to see it's a separate tool. And the dashboards are nice. I mean,
Right.
you get the overview of where you're going and how you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. What else did you find like during the vendor evaluation process, right? You say like some of the vendors were kind of unable to maybe adapt to your processes or, answer kind of tough questions.
Some of them were unable to tell us how they could customize it for us. So they were either really specific to a sponsor or they were really specific to no one, and we would have to do all of the implementation. And they were just software, and we would have to make all the specs.
Interesting.
And so I think that, we had a consultant from a QA perspective come in and give us information about, remember, they're a software vendor. They may not be providing you the implementation consulting, and that's where Medidata came in really nicely. You provided us the consulting from an implementation perspective as well as the software.
Yeah.
Now the consultants, they're still around, which is really awesome. They haven't left us. And it's not because we can't do what we need to do. We just, they're just there for double checks, which is nice.
Right, right. Well, and you gave an example earlier of just, being able to adapt the software, to send out SUSARs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the function that you're talking about is something that's actually built more for the SOP management side,
Right.
right? But
The acknowledgement piece, yeah.
Right, but the implementation team at Medidata was able to kind of solve the problem. Do you find that? What was their familiarity with sort of the business process that was underlying what you guys were trying to do, right?
They were really good. I mean, they were able to listen to what we needed. They didn't just solve the problem before asking us the question of what it was about. They helped us think through the process. They asked us what the process was that was currently there, where the sticking points were, what we needed to replace from a tracking perspective. We have because at the end of the day we have to submit the files back to the sponsor. We have a TMF log document that we send to our sponsors. It's a big, huge Excel document. It says these are all the documents that you have in this box, quote unquote. This is our end deliverable, and so we have that document. We needed to be able to replace that document at the end of the day, but our document didn't just have the name of the file and the date it was created and that. It had other information, so we were able to adapt the properties to put that information in there because we needed to know who was the PI, who was the sub-I, who was the study coordinator, which Clio form was this and who was on this 1572 and that kind of stuff. So we were able to adapt the properties to totally replace that Excel document. So no more trackers.
No more trackers.
No more trackers.
I feel like I should get a button. No more trackers.
No more trackers. The other thing we found was that as we were implementing the CTMS, we realized that our old CTMS had a CRA toolkit, which made sense to the CRAs at the time because they were the ones that were going in and putting the status of information. And so instead of creating a working file for them of the protocol, the minutes from all of their CRA meetings and that kind of stuff, and their the trackers that they were using for the site. So if the site had a study, a screening log that they needed to complete, or those kind of just easy to do handouts. Those things were in our old CTMS, and as we were moving to the Medidata CTMS, we found that the Medidata CTMS we actually don't have our CRAs in because they're in strategic monitoring. Oh. So we needed a new home for that. And so we said it doesn't go in the DIA model. Like, it needs to go somewhere. And they said, well, we can use RCM for that. Like, that's just that's RCM. And so we have an entire environment where the CRAs have access to it. So they have the ability to add documents and remove, or the trial manager has the ability to add documents and remove documents, and the CRAs have the ability to download them. So it's just quote unquote standard box functionality,
right.
A standard RCM functionality, but it's in our eTMF. So
right.
Our eTMF implementation became not just eTMF, but actually our working drive. And so people are able to go in and know what's in there and why they're in there.
That's awesome. Well, and it's one login, right? And there's the, there's the benefits of not having things locally all the time, and losing a laptop or Yeah,
they do not have local drive. Like, I mean, and especially if they're going to do rave source verification, right? They have the ability to go in and put the CRF completion guidelines in there, and remind the sites and keep it updated and put facts documents and that kind of stuff in there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Implementation, we talked about like the various stakeholders for the evaluation. Were the same people involved in the implementation, and what roles did people play from the Aperio side during the implementation?
So during the implementation, we didn't necessarily kick out DM, but we pretty much put them in the back burner. The same safety sort of came and went, especially when we were doing the SUSAR stuff. But we did bring in our eTMF head, we have a senior CSS person that is the eTMF owner at our shop. So she came in and she took on responsibility. So as the implementation owner, that was my job. As the implementation owner, I actually was on vacation the week we did UAT, which freaked them all out. But I wrote all the scripts and said, play the role of a CRA and play the role of a data manager and play the role of a project manager. Can you do the reports you need to do and that kind of stuff? And is there properties that we're missing, or can you load the documents and that kind of stuff? So can you do your job? And so then I was on vacation. And so I come back and they're like, I don't appreciate that you were on vacation, but I appreciate you were on vacation because they had to learn it. Yeah. So since then they've adapted some more of the properties. They've gotten a lot more flexible in doing things. Because eTMS is a validated software, we validated the process for the software. Because it's CFR Part 11 compliant, we wanted to make sure that we had documentation around user management, change control, and that kind of thing. So we did do a full UAT with a summary and a document of why we did it and how we did it.
Did the Medidata implementation team help you provide some of that or seed some of those documents?
They seeded the training documentation.
Okay.
So how to load a document, how to run a report, how to move a document, and that kind of stuff. So they seeded a lot of the documentation, mostly because at the time the knowledge space wasn't fabulous. Right. Now the knowledge space is much better. Yeah. But they seeded a lot of that documentation, and then they gave us some additional test cases. But okay. I've done a lot of implementations of software, so it wasn't as necessary.
Right.
So it wasn't as necessary.
That makes sense. Moving forward, what's your philosophy on system updates, and how do you manage software once it's implemented?
So we have an SOP we're in the process of finalizing that goes through application management. So we've decided to not call it software.
Okay.
You can call it software. We're going to call it an application. Because we don't actually create the software, right? We're just configuring the application. So we're calling it an application, and then we will document any changes to the properties. We will document how the study is set up, and any amendments that are added to the DIA structure that's pushed out to the study for placeholder perspectives. So that process information will be documented on a studies perspective, but on a bigger perspective, from a global perspective, Medidata sends out notifications pretty much daily at this point of all the changes that are going to happen on all of the software, and I made the mistake of signing up for every one of them. So I get them all, and I think I signed them up in both email addresses. But anyhow, so I get those emails, and I have instructed and encouraged all of our key stakeholders for each product to go in and sign up for those products. Okay. So we review those release notes and then determine if any of them are affecting or impacting our validation. Okay. Most of them don't. No. Most of them don't. Most of them are minor, quote unquote, tweaks, and we can just say, okay, we're just training additional folks on it. Or if we're going to use additional features, we'll just train people on it.
Right.
the eTMF changes that are going to happen in November with total integration with iMedidata will result in us documenting a little bit more about how our user management process is going to drastically change. So we'll document that.
Okay. But your overall philosophy is to take updates when you can get them?
Yeah.
Generally?
Yeah. So we really do believe in single instance, and I think it was Glenn said yesterday, you've reduced the risk because the security now meets the current standards, right, as opposed to the standards from 6 years ago or 2 years ago or whenever you started the product. So yes, we do take them, and being an old data manager, it was hard to change. But now I'm like, yeah, I mean, I do it all the time with my iPhone. I do it, with all of my, tools. We use, Office 365, and, so we really do embrace the single instance, the vendor knows what they're doing concept, as long as you've got great documentation, right, which you guys do.
Yeah.
The eTMF documentation that I did actually get to read all of the documentation with the requirements and the testing and all that stuff, and that's what made my validation documentation a whole lot easier, because I could point back to, okay, we, Aperio and Medidata, validated the eTMF to meet CFR Part 11 compliance because Medidata did this and we did this. Because with CFR Part 11 compliance, there's always a piece on training and control of user access and that stuff. So there's always a process that you, as the owner of the application, as responsible for, and then Medidata or whatever can say it meets the standards, but in order to implement it, you need to do your own.
Right. Yeah. And I like this approach, right? It's to your point, we do it personally all the time, right? You get updates on your devices. You take the update, right? Because you know that the sort of the short-term inconvenience is outweighed by the benefit that you kind of get long-term. It's organizations though that's really tough, and it's neat to see you guys taking I'd call it mature, disciplined kind of an approach to it, because it's very easy to say, ugh, I don't want to deal with this quarter. I'm just going to put this off. The problem is that you do that, and then the next one's tougher, and you put that off, and next thing you know, you're 2 years out of date. You have to do an update, and it's massive and painful, and
it's a lot easier to read, little bits at a time, right? Like, push a little bit to the left, a little bit to the left, and all of a sudden you're off the chart. Yeah. So we do have a process where I have to read them, I have to document that I've read them, and I have to quote unquote store them, which really means that I point back to your documentation because I'm not going to store them again. But so, I mean, we do have a process around reading them. Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. So we've talked about evaluation process, your implementation experience. We've talked about the good parts of this. What challenges have you had now that you've got the software and you're using, or the application, sorry, and you're using it? What kind of challenges have you run into? What things do you wish we could do?
So with every software, there's always too much clicks, right? Right. So there's always someone that says, I really wish I could go from here to over there. And so the end user team says, I'd like less clicks. But it is what it is. It's not awful. It's just they'd like a little bit less clicks. They'd like to jump instead of click.
And I'm assuming you fed this back to your implementation team.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
I know the feedback loop there is pretty tight. I get CC'd on a lot of emails about that.
It is pretty tight. As I said, I mean, you guys, they did a great job of sharing good practices and veering us off bad things and making sure that what we wanted to do, we did. We customized a couple of things, but so that it met where the CTMS calls a site started, and we've got that naming convention down so that it coupled and it linked well. But yeah.
Nice. What's next for Aperio? What's the next project you have in the top of your head there?
So the strategic monitoring and CTMS will be done hopefully next week or the week after, and then I think Cindy wants to do enroll and TSTV.
Fun.
So yeah, we've got
So what's driving that next, right?
Well, enroll, the biggest thing is around informed consents, because that's the one that is the hardest to fix, right? If it's done wrong, it's a protocol violation. Like, let's get it right the first time.
Right.
So that's the biggest one with that. And then TSDV, I think we've all discussed that it's the egg in the chicken, right? Like, it's less TSDV, but the monitor is still going to be on site for 8 hours. So they're going to do other things on 8 hours. So it's from a CRO perspective, it's selling the client on the additional burden for TSDV to say that you're going to get more quality data.
Nice. I like it. There was a handout. Did everybody were they handing them out on the way in, or are we doing it on the way out?
Did it on the way in.
On the way in, awesome.
So
on the way in. Talk a little bit about that, and then we can take some questions?
Yeah. So it was, so I unfortunately didn't have this when I started. I will say, it was it was a reminder, and I'm not a project manager. I'm not a project manager. Suzanne is our COO. She's an awesome project manager. I am not. So this was a reminder to me for the next implementation, what I need to do. What are the things that I need to be concerned about? And the nice part about this checklist is that it's not really eTMF specific. It's any tool. So, make sure that you have meetings. We met with the Medidata team every single week, if not more often. Eric was in North Carolina, so he came to our offices, sat down with us, and whether or not it was a half an hour one week or an hour and a half another week, have those meetings. Medidata prides themselves on face-to-face meetings. We're mostly a virtual company, right. So we didn't really feel the need for face-to-face meetings, but with the eTMF, it was really helpful to have Eric in-house. And then, but make sure that there's meeting minutes, because people forget what they said 6 months ago. The eTMF implementation didn't take that long, but the CTMS one would. Right. And then remember the purpose of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and where the goals are. We had a lot of folks do an evaluation of the software, and then when we went to go do UAT, they were like, you know what? We thought we were going to do this. And so it had twisted and shifted a little bit here and there, and so not so much with the eTMF, but with other implementations. So I created this mostly for myself, but if you guys, it's helpful, it's great.
Awesome. Well, thank you for putting that together, and thanks for your time today. I think we've got a couple of minutes. Do we have some questions from the audience?
Okay, good questions.
Hi, sorry if I missed this, but was your implementation all directly with Medidata Professional Services, or were there any third-party partners that you...
We're a CRO, so it was directly with Medidata.
Okay. Are all the implementations of eTMF, because it's in your cloud, part of, like, directly implemented by Medidata now, or do you have partners that you work with as well?
So at this point, I think everything is Medidata Professional Services. I can tell you I'm working with a couple of partners to develop some implementation practices, but I don't think we've done one yet with a partner. So,
yeah.
Just a couple questions. Are you running global trials with it?
We are not, but there shouldn't be a problem with it.
Okay. And which system owns the sites? And when it's created in that, when a site is created in that system, does it automatically get created in the eTMF?
It's created in, well, it will be created in iMedidata. So once it's created in iMedidata, it will show up in all of the applications. It's part of Cloud Admin.
All right. Thank you.
It's the master data.
Can you explain what you did with your integration between your eTMF and your CTMS, how that works?
So right now, it's the CTMS is to use Medidata CTMS. So it's really Cloud Admin that owns the master data, and then it pushes it down. From CTMS to eTMF, there's not really any data integrated. From strategic monitoring, the visit reports are supposed to go into eTMF.
yeah. Here,
Go ahead.
So for the next, like, say, 3 weeks, the integration between, I'll call it legacy. I'll pretend it's 3 weeks from now. We'll call it legacy eTMF and legacy CTMS is a one-to-one integration, right? So you can drop trip reports and stuff. It's a relatively basic type of an integration. In the next few weeks, we're going to release the new version of eTMF, and that's fully integrated with Cloud Admin and Medidata, right? So that gets you master data management centralized across the platform. It's centralized user management. And then we're going to start doing much more broad auto-population of artifacts. Right, so it won't just be CTMS. It'll be things from Rave. It'll be things from balance and right. All of the different components will start populating artifacts into the TMF on a more automated basis. If that helps.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Lots less clicks.
Yes, lots less clicks.
Downloads and uploads.
Yes. Oh, you've got the mic. Go for it.
Do you do that's the platform support? So you mentioned
Google.
Box, but like Office 365, OneDrive.
Yeah, so we've got the integration with Box, right, to enable editing across. That's our most fully functioning integration from a I guess a collaboration perspective. I think we can do like something with Google Drive if you want to, and we're talking. I think those are the only two that we have today.
Yeah, I think it's Google Drive.
Okay. Any plans for OneDrive?
I mean, we effectively get Office 365 integration through the Box relationship, right? So, like, I assume that's a common one, right? People are looking for Office 365,
Right.
and that's essentially what you get through Box, right? Because they've got the tie to Microsoft, and that's effectively our Office 365 integration.
Okay, thanks.
So I know that you said that everything was on paper before you decided to pick up eTMF. Has Medidata done anything that was legacy, already on another system and brought it into your eTMF or migrated that data?
I don't know.
Not that I can think of.
Go ahead, Fabio.
Sorry. Oh, sorry.
Hi. We haven't done document migration ourselves, but we have customers who have done it. So we set up the system, and we provide some guidance.
Yeah.
In one case, I know that a customer brought in a third party to do the migration for them.
Yeah. It does load documents in batch, so.
So
Yeah, Fabio, I'm Norma. It's my customer. And we helped them find a third party with Fabio's help that they've contracted to migrate a lot of legacy data into eTMF,
Yeah.
into RCM.
So yeah, so if you have a certified copy of a document and you want to load it into your eTMF, it will, you can load it in batch, upload it, multiple documents at once.
Well, I see I'm getting the hook from the back, so I'm
Okay.
going to cut this short. But we do have,
Over
we'll be downstairs at the Innovation Center. There's an RCM booth. I wanted to say thank you very much, Melissa. Really appreciate the time. It's always fun talking to you.
It is fun.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.